At 10:41 on a Tuesday morning, I shoved past the brass doors of the Knox County Registry of Deeds with a heartbeat that sounded like boat oars smacking dark water. A clerk looked up, pen hovering midair. At the counter, under the fluorescent hum, my niece, my sister's little girl who once collected sea glass with me along Owl's Head, was leaning into a notary's desk, her hand steady as a surgeon. She was signing my name on a deed I had never seen, on the title to the inn my husband and I spent 30 years building, one leaky roof and one thin tourist season at a time. "That signature," I said, my voice too calm for the lightning in my chest, "is not mine." The room stilled, paper rustled, then stopped. Savannah froze, pen paused on the curling flourish of the H in heart. The notary's eyes flicked from the laminated stamp to me, then back to the deed. I could see the reflection of my own face in the glass partition, older than I remembered, hair pulled back in a rubber band I'd snagged from the kitchen drawer, salt lines creasing a mouth that hadn't slept. Security was already moving when I reached the counter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words themselves were loud enough to rattle the windows. "Step away," the clerk said. But I was in the space between my niece and a future I refused to sign away. Savannah's jaw flexed. She looked small in that office light, younger than her 32 years, too thin in a blazer that didn't fit. Behind her, a man I'd met twice and hated both times pretended to study a bulletin about homestead exemptions. Trent, always over-perfumed, always smiling like a postcard salesman. Let me tell you how we got here, because no one wakes up and walks into a registry to stop her own niece from stealing a home without a story full of currents and undertows. The day before, the mail had been a bad kind of heavy. There was a letter with the IRS logo warning of tax implications for the sale of my income-producing property. I read it twice, then again, trying to stuff the word sale back into its envelope. There was a new credit line I had never opened, a notice about a wire transfer I hadn't requested, and a statement from a bank in Portland I didn't use, thanking me for consolidating hospitality assets. The word hospitality is a polite way of saying you work while other people vacation. I knew it too well.
I own the Bluebird Harbor Inn. If you've driven Route 1 through Rockland, you've seen it, whether you remember or not. A cedar-shingled place with a wraparound porch and a weathered sign that swings in an onshore breeze. My husband, Joe, and I bought it when we were too young to be careful. We painted the trim in April cold that clawed our knuckles raw, learned to patch drywall from the kind of men who make jokes to hide their kindness, mortgaged hope, and then mortgaged it again. Joe died 6 years ago, on a Tuesday that didn't ask permission. Since then, I have learned the ache of winter vacancy and the relief of booking calendars that finally fill in late June. I know which guests will drink coffee on the porch at dawn and which will complain that the gulls are too loud. I know the exact creak in the stair at the bend, and I know where the ledger sits in the office, a blue hardcover bound with thread and time. Our story, written in numbers we were proud to make honest. Savannah started helping with bookkeeping this spring after Joe died. She had a knack for Excel and a way of smoothing over my stubbornness with a grin I trusted because I remembered the girl who once fell asleep on my shoulder during a fireworks show in Camden. Her mother, my sister Claire, had been gone almost a decade by then. I was a stand-in mother without the legal title. We were close enough that I didn't mind when she rearranged the spice cupboard and replaced my ancient receipt printer with a sleeker model I pretended to hate. She'd come over on slow evenings with Thai takeout from Rockland, open a laptop and say, "Aunt Maya, If you let me put this quarter's expenses in classes, you'll stop guessing at profitability. I let her. I had always trusted people with keys. My failing, not theirs. The first thing that made my ribs go cold was a postcard of all things. It was a welcome to your new account card from a bank I didn't bank with, congratulating me on migrating business checking for Bluebird Harbor LLC. I do not have 3 last names, and I did not have an LLC. We were a simple S-corp with a simple accountant who named her cats after herbs and insisted on cash envelopes for tips. I brought the postcard to Savannah, who laughed softly and said it was probably a marketing thing. They send these to everyone with a business account on public records, she said. Toss it. Nothing in her face looked like a person bending a story. Then the vendor phone call started. A hardware supplier asked where to send invoices now that Bluebird Harbor Hospitality LLC had merged into North Granite Hospitality. I said there was no North Granite, and he said someone had spelled my name correctly as the registered agent. The power company called to confirm a change in auto pay and asked for the last 4 of my social. I told them no and hung up, sweating into the phone. The dishwasher in room 5 broke that afternoon. I fixed it with a paperclip and a prayer and pretended everything was fine. It wasn't. The night before the registry, I climbed into the attic to bring down summer quilts for the little rooms and for the insomnia that had started chewing on me. I found a box I didn't recognize tucked behind the old Christmas wreaths, an archive box that belonged in the office, not above the guest rooms. Inside were photocopies of my driver's license and social security card, my first marriage certificate from the kind of court that prints on paper so thin you can read your future through it. There were sticky notes in a handwriting that was not mine, attached to sample forms for a durable power of attorney. Use if she resists, one note read. There was a draft of a quitclaim deed transferring Bluebird Harbor Inn with all fixtures, improvements, and appurtenances to North Granite Hospitality, signed by Maya Josephina Hart, with a signature close enough to pass a glance but wrong enough to make a person who knows themselves scream. I didn't scream. I called Cal. He lives 2 houses down in a shingled ranch that looks out on the bay with a small stack of lobster traps for company and an ancient lab named Tug. Calvin Whitaker retired as county sheriff when his knees told him to be less heroic. He still thinks like a detective and still moves like someone who might chase you a mile if you made him angry enough. He took one look at the photocopies and said, "You should have told me about the bank postcard." I said I didn't want to be paranoid. He said he didn't want to be a widower of an inn and that I should come with him to the registry first thing. Bring the ledger, he said. Bring anything that proves chain of title and your signature on past deeds. The ledger had been Joe's idea. If computers die, paper still floats, he'd say. It held every closing, every promissory note, every refinance, and a Polaroid of us when the paint was still wet in 1993. I tucked it under my arm like a child and met Cal in his truck at 9:50. Savannah called at 9:53. "Can you grab a case of sparkling water if you go by Hannaford?" she asked. "We're out and the guests keep asking." Her voice was cheerful. She said "we" like an oath. I was in the registry by 10:41. After I said the signature wasn't mine, things moved in weird time. The notary took her hand off the stamp and swallowed. The clerk pressed a button that summoned a security guard who looked 22 and mortified. Trent held out his hands in mock surrender and then withdrew them, eyes ticking to the door. Savannah's face went white, then hot red in a wave that made her look like a kid caught shoplifting. Aunt Maya, she said, as if the way she used my name could unmake ink. I can explain. I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked the clerk to pull the last 10 filings from my parcel number. He did. There they were, neat and official. A series of documents that formed a story I hadn't lived. And articles of organization for North Granite Hospitality listing Savannah as manager and me as member. A consent from me to transfer real property, a durable power of attorney, springing, with my signature at the bottom and Trent listed as a second agent. A warranty deed that hadn't yet been recorded, thank God, sitting in the notary's tray like a grenade missing its pin. When a thing is stamped and recorded in Maine, reversing it is not like untying a bow. You have to cut. You have to bleed. You have to go to court and argue in a room that smells like old wood and somebody else's bad perfume. Security escorted us to a side room with glass walls. People outside pretended not to watch. Savannah wouldn't meet my eyes. Trent had his hands in his pockets as if to show he wasn't dangerous. I thought of the box in my attic, the sticky notes, the plan tidy enough to have worked if I'd waited to make the beds in room 2 and room 7 instead of going to the mail. Cal arrived with the ledger like I'd asked him to bring God. He set it on the table and spread the old deeds and Joe's careful annotations in a fan. The clerk's shoulders lowered. He believed paper. We needed more than belief.
I don't want a scene, Savannah said, which was funny given where we were. This is a restructure for taxes, for your future. Trent knows a developer who— Stop, I said. I'm not stealing from you, she said. I'm saving you. You can't save a person by drowning them and claiming you moved them closer to the ocean. I didn't say that out loud. I asked the notary, whose name was Janet, and whose lips were pressed into a seam to mark the deed refused to acknowledge. She did. I asked Cal to call the DA's office to request a temporary hold on filings relating to my parcel number for the day. He did. I asked the clerk to make certified copies of everything for my lawyer. He did, looking relieved to have a thing to do with his hands. Trent stood up. We're done, he said, and I saw the petulance behind the cologne. This is harassment. Sit down, Cal said in the voice that had probably stopped bar fights 20 times. Trent sat. I'll tell you later why I did it, softer, turning to me. Not here. Tell me now, I said, because some truths curdle if you refrigerate them. She looked at her hands. She didn't speak. In the silence, I could hear the big clock above the door that never ticks loud until your life is in pieces. We left without filing anything and without handcuffs because I did not yet know whether I wanted my family in a cell. That's a question you cannot answer in a fluorescent room. You answer it at a kitchen table, the wood nicked with years of other decisions that didn't ruin your blood pressure. The registry doors bumped behind us as we stepped into a noon glare that made every little grain of grit on the sidewalk look like glitter.
We drove back to the inn in Cal's truck. He kept one hand loose on the wheel and didn't say what was on his face. You need a lawyer yesterday. I called Patel and Sawyer in Rockland because their receptionist had once brought a pie to our front desk when her cousin got married at the inn, and people who bring pie are either dangerous or wonderful. It turned out their senior partner, Garrett Patel, had served on a nonprofit board with Joe and had a soft spot for people who kept small things alive. Come now, he said when I told the receptionist what I needed. Bring the ledger, bring the copies, bring your patience. I found Savannah on the porch when we pulled up, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest like a teenager waiting to be grounded. Trent was not with her. I didn't ask where he went. The ocean was calm in that almost taunting way it gets in summer. Blue you could drink. A couple from New Jersey were shelling peas they'd bought at the farmer's market, their bowls balanced on their knees, like we were all in a Norman Rockwell painting and nothing bad had ever happened to anyone.
"We need to talk," Savannah said, standing. "Please. Not alone. Inside with Cal." Her eyes flicked to Cal. You know the look a child gives a dog who might decide to bark. We went to the office. I sat behind the worn oak desk where Joe used to twirl a pen and calculate occupancy rates as if it were a math problem at the end of the world. Cal leaned against the file cabinets. And my niece, my sister's daughter, the girl whose hair I braided at a sleepover when she was 9, told me a story I didn't know whether to believe. She had lost her job in April, not March, and not, "I'm just between contracts," like she told me, but they eliminated my department, which is corporate for "you're gone." She kept paying rent in Portland because moving felt like failure, and because Trent insisted the job he was closing was about to land. She used credit to cover the part of life we don't call luxury when it's groceries and car repair. She didn't tell me because she said she was ashamed, and because I had my own grief. "You talk to the house like Joe lives in the walls up Maya," she said, not unkindly. "I didn't want to be the next sadness you had to carry." That part of the story hurt in a clean way.
Then the part that bruised. Trent told her he knew people in development who wanted to partner with boutique properties. He said investors were lining up to buy into coastal hospitality portfolios. He said we could take on a silent partner who would handle the tax burden and invest in upgrades, and the inn would generate enough revenue to pay me a salary to do nothing while repositioning the asset. The words in that last sentence are the kind of words men like him use when they want to make theft sound like business. "It was never supposed to be a sale," Savannah said. "More like a modern structure." "You created a company without me," I said. "I put your name on it," she said, "as a member." "You forged my signature on an agreement to transfer the property," I said, "on a power of attorney." She swallowed. "I thought maybe if you saw it after, I'd what?" I asked. "Thank you?" "I thought you'd see that the numbers made sense." Her voice cracked. "I thought you'd be relieved." It was the wrong verb. I don't know if there's a right one. Cal asked one question. "Where did you get the copies of Maya's documents?" She looked at me. "From the office safe." She misread my face. "You told me the combination the winter you slipped on the porch. You said if you ever needed a gas bill for the accountant."
"I did," I said, "for the gas bill." "I didn't mean—" She stopped. "I don't know how to explain wanting something right and doing it wrong and not realizing you crossed the line until the line was behind you." I knew. We all know if we're honest enough with ourselves, but knowing doesn't clean up the mess. I told her I was going to a lawyer. She asked if she could come. Cal said no without asking me, and I was grateful. On the way to Patel and Sawyer, I rolled the window down and let Maine in. The smell of bait from someone's truck ahead fought with wild roses from the ditch. A teenager at the stoplight juggled a basketball and looked invincible. There are moments when the world refuses to match what's happening to your heart. It feels like an insult you're almost glad to receive. Garrett greeted me like a person who had seen too many kitchen table crises to be impressed by mine. He is square-shouldered, with hair that insists on parting even when the wind flips it. He shook my hand and listened without checking his watch. He handled the documents like a dentist tapping a tooth, gentle, precise, and absolutely sure about what he was looking at. They drafted a springing, durable power of attorney, but they use language that makes it act like a general power now, he said, tapping with a pen. That's sloppy enough that a judge won't like it, and strong enough to make trouble. The LLC filings are real, but without delivery and acceptance of a deed, the property isn't transferred. Yet. The bank accounts we can call and freeze. The registry will watch your parcel for 24 hours because we asked nicely. Beyond that, we need a temporary restraining order. What about charges? Asked Cal. Garrett slid his eyes to me, not to Cal. Do you want to charge your niece with forgery and attempted theft? We have the bones for that. We also have a problem. She's family. Prosecutors don't like to walk into family dynamics blind. And judges ask you what you really want. So I'm going to ask you, what do you want, Maya?
I wanted time back. I wanted last spring, when Savannah set the tulips and the blue vase on the registration desk and told me the new booking engine would reduce phone calls. I wanted to go upstairs and make the bed in room 6 without wondering if someone had rifled the nightstand. I wanted to stop thinking about Joe's laugh so hard it made my jaw ache. The law doesn't sell those. I said I wanted to keep my inn. I said I wanted whoever had done this to me to never be able to do it again. I said I wanted the bad bank account shut down and the fake LLC to wither. Good, he said. I can work with that. He drafted a complaint and a motion for a temporary restraining order with the speed of a man who does crosswords for fun. He called the DA's office and asked to speak with someone who understood white-collar crime that happens between people who hug on holidays. He photocopied the ledger and asked if he could take photographs of my signatures on the original mortgage, on old vendor contracts, on the one napkin Joe made me sign with a Sharpie the day we promised to stop working on Sundays. Judges love a pattern, he said. Juries too, if we go that far. We filed the TRO before 3, walked it to the courthouse 2 blocks away with as much ceremony as carrying a cake you can't afford to drop. The judge on emergency duty granted it without a hearing and set a date for a preliminary injunction at the end of the week. No transfers, no filings, no messing with bank accounts, Garrett said when we walked outside. If Trent sneezes money near your parcel number, we nail him. He had a way of making law sound like carpentry. Measure twice, cut once, brace the joists when you know a storm's coming. Back at the inn, I changed the password on the innkeeper software and called the 3 banks whose names were on my counterfeit mail. 2 were polite and quick to freeze what they could. The 3rd needed 10 hours and a supervisor. I stayed on hold while a guest came in to ask if we had a corkscrew. I know where every corkscrew on the property lives, like a magician with pockets, so I handed him one with a smile I was proud of because it didn't crack.
Savannah texted at 6. I'm sorry. It said so little and so much that I didn't know whether to reply. I didn't, because that was the only control I had that minute. Cal sat on the porch with Tug's head in his lap and drank the iced tea I made him because my hands needed to do something my heart couldn't govern. You're doing fine, he said. I've seen people fall apart for less. I told him I was not less, I was specific, and it was too much. We let the light go purple over the bay before he went home. Sleep is a wish you make when you lie down, not a right. I made the wish and watched the ceiling fan trace slow circles until the sky dulled around the edges of the blinds. I listened for sounds that meant danger and heard only the normal ghosts old buildings collect. Pipes sighing, wood settling, the wind asking to be let in. Around 3, I gave up and went downstairs to make a list because lists have saved me before. I wrote, call locksmith for the office safe, ask accountant to pull last 6 months of logins, change password to the payroll portal, copy security camera footage, buy new ledger paper, put Joe's Polaroid back where it belongs. I wrote, call Claire's friend Beth, the one who still talks to Savannah sometimes. Then I scribbled that out. The part of me who is private is also stubborn. By 9 the next morning, a county detective named Parker sat in my office chair and asked questions in a voice so gentle I almost liked him. He wore a tie too tight for summer and had eyes that made me think he'd learned patience early. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. That question again. It would follow me like a gull follows a boat, as long as there were fries to steal. "I want you to help me catch Trent before he runs," I said, "and I want a piece of paper that keeps my niece away from the front desk." "We can both do," he said, and opened a notebook. If you've never realized your software keeps more than receipts, it is something to behold. Savannah had logged into the payroll account from an IP address in Portland the week before to add a contractor. The contractor had a routing number that traced to a prepaid card service. There were emails from my account to a bank manager authorizing new view-only users that I hadn't written at hours I was in bed, with sentences that looked too polite to be me. "Linguistic analysis will show the shift," Garrett said later, like a person who believes in science. "But we won't need it. The browser logs are enough."
Savannah texted again, not sorry this time. "Please, please, please let me explain before court." I didn't respond. Then she called. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, she was at the porch railing, eyes red, hands shaking like a cold day in July you didn't dress for. Cal had seen her coming and was already on the steps. He is a wall in denim when he wants to be. "I need to talk to my aunt," she said, and tugged her sleeve like there was a thread that could unravel the world back to before. "Please, Cal." "You'll get your day at the hearing," he said. "Today is for quiet." "This is my fault," she said, in a way that sounded like confession from a grade schooler. "Not his. I did it. I read the forms. I filed the LLC. He just what?" Cal asked. "He thought it was a good idea," she whispered. "I pushed." There are truths you want to be false, because the false version is easier to forgive. I had wanted Trent to be the devil and Savannah his marionette. The idea that she drove the bus and he cheered made my stomach go low. I told Cal to let her up the steps. He looked at me like he wished I'd say no. I said yes, because love is a habit you can't break in a week. In the office, she clutched a mug like heat could hold her steady. "When Mom died," she said, the ring on her finger tapping porcelain, "you stepped into the hole like you thought there was a bridge. I remembered that when I lost my job. I thought I'd return the favor. I thought I'd build you a bridge and tell you about it halfway across." She laughed with no humor in it. "Arrogant. I see that now. There's a list of things I need from you, because lists are also mercy. Every account you opened, every password you used, every person you talked to. I need a timeline."
She looked like someone told to pick up a mountain. "I'll try." "Don't try," I said, softer than my words. "Do it. For me if you ever loved me. For yourself if you want to sleep again." She nodded. "I'll bring it tonight." "No," I said. "Email Garrett. He'll receive it, not me." She put the mug down and it made the smallest sound. "I miss the smell of room spray," she said, and that was the moment that made my eyes sting. There is a particular scent we use, citrus and linen, that signals check-in and clean starts. She missed it like a person misses a blanket. Trent did not miss anything about me. His attorney called Garrett that afternoon and blustered. Garrett let him. Then he said, "Temporary restraining order is granted. We'll see you Friday in front of Judge Manning." When he hung up, he said, "Men like that file papers, not apologies." I cooked pasta for the guests and smiled and asked about their schooner trip and whether they preferred blueberry or strawberry jam with breakfast. Grief and anger can live in your body at the same time as hospitality. That night at 10, Savannah emailed a spreadsheet with a subject line that said, "For your lawyer." It had dates and amounts and notes that read like a map of my inn turned on its head. Meetings with men named Kyle and Wraith. an LLC filing on a day I'd been at the dentist, a wire for a good faith deposit to a title company meant to take my deed if the notary at the registry had stamped fast enough. There were text message screenshots where Trent told her to get the ledger because old ladies cling to paper, to pull the safe combo because she won't notice if you put it back, to be brave, which in context means forget your conscience. I sent the spreadsheet to Garrett and to Detective Parker at 10:04. At 10:16, Parker wrote back, "Thank you. Keep your doors locked tonight." That is a sentence that is both capable of comfort and incapable of granting it. On Friday, the courtroom smelled faintly of polish and tension. Judge Manning wears her hair tight and her patience tighter. She read the file like a person who has watched too many families set themselves on fire. She told the attorneys, "This is the part where you appeal to my better nature. Just know my nature has seen things." Garrett stood and laid out the story with a kind of mercy that didn't take an ounce off the steel. Trent's lawyer argued there was no harm because no deed had been recorded. Judge Manning said intent is harm's twin and signed the preliminary injunction with a pen so heavy it clunked when she set it down.
Then something happened I did not expect. Savannah stood up when she was not asked to, hands trembling so hard the papers rattled. "Your Honor," she said, her voice a reed in wind, "I need to say something." Her lawyer looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. Judge Manning tilted her head in that way that says both go on and be careful. Savannah swallowed. She stared at the seal on the wall instead of at me. "I did it," she said, and the little room went still. The LLC, the signatures. I took photographs of her IDs. I put the documents in the attic. Trent said it was smarter, but it was my decision. I was angry and I was selfish. I thought I was entitled to a future someone else should pay for. I was wrong. Her voice cracked on the last word. People love tears in court until they don't. Judge Manning looked over her glasses at my niece. "That is either remarkable honesty or strategic theater," she said. "Either way, thank you for saving me time." She glanced at me. "Mrs. Hart, do you want to be heard?" There was a version of me who wanted to stand up and confess everything I'd ever done wrong, in the hope that confession cleanses us all. There was another version who wanted to stay silent until the house felt whole again. I split the difference. "I want to keep my inn," I said, voice steady because I had practiced in the mirror. "I want to protect it and myself. I want the court to enjoin any transfer. I want the court to make sure none of my accounts are touched. And I want a no contact order for the inn unless I invite it." I did not say I love her, because love is assumed in rooms like that. I did not say I hope she repairs herself, because hope is a private prayer. The judge granted everything we asked and set a status conference for 30 days out. On the way out of the courthouse, Trent brushed by me hard enough to make it clear he still believed the world was his shoulder to shove. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, which is what small men say when they run out of big moves. Cal stepped between us as if the air were a thing he could plant in.
Detective Parker stopped me on the steps. "Would like to wire the office for audio," he said. "If Trent reaches out, we want him on record. He's not as careful as he thinks." "What about Savannah?" I asked. "She just self-incriminated in open court," he said. "But she also potentially helped our case. If you want to refer charges, we'll bring them. If you don't, the DA can still prosecute. Either way, we want Trent." He looked toward the bay. Men like him don't stop after one in. By the time we reached the truck, the sky had clouded into a flat white that made the water look like steel. Tug harumphed from the back seat. Cal put the ledger in my lap as if to reassure both of us we still had something unbroken. "You did good," he said. "I feel terrible," I said. "You can feel two things," he said. "Most people do." The next days blurred with all the small labors that keep an inn open. Running laundry, wiping the fingerprints none of us think we leave, pressing pillowcases until the cotton lay obedient. I changed passwords until the words on the screen ceased to register as language. People checked in with suitcases and expectations. I carried their luggage and their tiny dramas like an old pro, which by then I was.
Savannah moved in with a friend in Thomaston. She sent Garrett updates on accounts we hadn't found. She brought the key to my safe back in an envelope she left with Cal. She did not come to the porch. There were mornings my hand picked up the phone to call her before my head put it down. Distance can be discipline. It can also be unkind. Trent did not like the taste of being fenced. He called the inn twice from a number that didn't show on caller ID and hung up when Cal picked up. He sent a man named Rafe to talk sense, who turned out to be one of those fragile bulls who break china and brag about it. Cal asked him to leave in a voice that suggested he'd rather not ask again. Rafe left. Detective Parker kept his word and put small microphones in my office that afternoon. I cooked a pan of brownies and left them by the coffee, as if sugar could court look. 3 nights later, the phone rang at 11:12 when most of the rooms were quiet and the bay moved like breath. I was in the office balancing the drawer. I answered, and Trent's voice slid through the line with the slime of a dock underfoot. "We can fix this," he said. "Sign a partnership agreement and we call off the dog and pony show." "What dog?" I asked. "Your former niece," he said. The phrase snapped something small and important inside me. She puts herself on a hook in court and you let her dangle? Cold. "I did not tell her to confess," I said. "I don't tell women what to do," he said, and I almost laughed because it was absurd. "Bring the ledger to the meeting Saturday. A buyer wants the paper history. We'll settle in cash. You get your house by the sea in an annuity. You're too old to be making beds, Maya." "I am exactly old enough to know a con when I hear one," I said. The recorder blinked green. "Meet me here Saturday at 10, I said, and set the hook without trembling. Bring your buyer." "Smart woman," he said. The line clicked. My hand shook after I hung up. Then I sat in that office chair and remembered every time Joe had told me we could do hard things if we did them in order. I wiped the counter. I made a list. I slept for 3 hours and dreamed of goals. Detective Parker parked 2 streets over on Saturday morning. Cal sat in the parlor in plain clothes that didn't look plain on him because his posture always ruins his cover. I laid out coffee like we were decent people welcoming company. Trent came with a man whose shoes were too shiny for Rockland. "Caspian Ridge Partners," the shiny man said, trying to shake my hand, which I did not offer. "We help owners free equity. Win-win." "That word," I said, and smiled with all my teeth. Win-win. They wanted to see my ledger. I said I'd show it when we discussed the payment terms. They wanted to walk the property. I said later. They wanted to charm me. I've been charmed by better. Trent started the pitch he'd likely given a dozen times. You keep a stake, we take the risk, we bring expertise and Instagram accounts with followers who say curated in the bathroom. He slid a document across the desk and tapped the signature line as if it were a bell and he wanted dessert. The microphones under the desk recorded the part where he explained end runs around the injunction as temporary workarounds. They recorded him saying, "No one gets hurt," which is a tell even poker players know. They recorded him admitting to drafting the LLC filings, even though Savannah had said she did. And they recorded him telling the partner, "She's old school, offer cash." Detective Parker walked in when Trent pulled a manila envelope from his messenger bag with the swagger of a high school boy who bought beer without getting carded. He froze mid-smirk. The partner's mouth did a fish thing. Kyle stood up slow, grinned, and took a long drink of coffee.
Arrest is not as dramatic as television. It is paperwork and rights recited and a man who thought he was a storm realizing he's a puddle. The partner sputtered about attorneys and misunderstandings while an officer with a calm face escorted him outside. Trent tried to look dignified. It didn't fit him like his cologne. After they left, the inn felt roomy with relief. I shut the office door and leaned my head on the cool of the wood. Cal put the ledger back on its shelf, the way you return a heart to a chest in a story where the hero doesn't die. "That was tidy," he said. "I don't feel tidy," I said. "Get there later," he said, because he believes in later the way some men believe in fishing times. Right now, you did the thing. Savannah texted at noon. "Did he come?" she wrote. I didn't reply because there was no sentence that wouldn't hurt. She texted again. "I'll go with whatever you decide," she wrote. "Charges, no charges, a letter from me to the DA, an apology, nothing, all of it. I don't want what I want anymore. I want what lets you sleep." The DA called on Monday. "We're filing," she said. He's not a first-timer. He ran a similar scam in New Hampshire at a ski lodge, an Airbnb cluster outside Burlington, with a partner who plays golf better than he reads ethics. Your niece's testimony will help. We can charge her too. We can also consider a deferred prosecution agreement if you support it. That means she pays restitution, does community service, stays clean, and this doesn't follow her like a bad smell for the next 40 years. "Does deferred mean no one learns anything?" I asked. "It means sometimes consequences teach better when they're allowed to connect long-term to a person's sense of themselves," she said. "It also means we don't waste resources on someone who can be steered back into the world without handcuffs."
"Thou think," I said, and meant it. I spent that week doing things that used to be automatic, ordering more sugar packets, filling the bird feeder, telling the housekeeper she could go home at 3 because the rooms were light. I stood at the property line and watched the water slosh against the stones and wondered how many women like me had felt a similar unmooring and then tied themselves back to shore by baking muffins and making calls. Probably all of them. Savannah asked to see me. I said no, and then yes, and then no again, because I didn't know whether my face would be mercy or map. We finally sat on the back steps of the inn at dusk because the day softens people like a good sauce. She looked worn in the way a person looks when their story stops protecting them. "I wrote the DA," she said, handing me a copy. It was a letter with simple, unpretty sentences. It asked for a chance to do the hard work without the bars. It did not ask me to forgive her. It said she'd pay back whatever was determined by the court and by me. It said she'd volunteer at New Hope Midcoast because women stolen from are part of that community too. "I don't want to decide for you, but I will accept what you choose." "I don't know what I choose," I said. "Then I'll wait," she said. And for once I believed her. In the end, I wrote the DA back with words it took me too long to find. I asked her to pursue everything against Trent. I asked her to propose a deferred prosecution agreement for Savannah that put conditions on her life far stricter than any apology could. Restitution to me for the fees I had paid to the lawyer and the banks for cleaning foul residue. 2 years of community service that required her to show up on days when she'd rather be anywhere else. A job, not for me, but somewhere that keeps her busy and narrow. Counseling, because sometimes the hole you fall into is older than the person who finds himself at the bottom. No contact with my accounts, with my staff, with my business, unless I invited it. It felt like choosing a surgery that saves a limb, but guarantees a scar.
The DA agreed. Judge Manning liked the plan because it was hard and because it had more math than magic. I watched Savannah stand before a bench and say, "Yes, Your Honor," to terms that would keep her tired and honest. I watched Trent plead into a microphone that made his voice small and scratchy, as if even the technology didn't want to amplify him. The partner took a deal and said names fat men say in country clubs. There was a clipping in the Career Gazette a week later that skated around the mess because towns like ours don't name names unless the name's by advertising. There was a moment in August when I thought maybe the inn was going to be quiet enough that I could feel again without tipping. It came during a morning that smelled like hot sugar and salt. The hydrangeas were ridiculous, and the wind played with the hem of the porch curtains. I watched a couple get engaged in front of the sign because their friend told them the light would be good. The girl cried in the way that makes you glad to witness people remembering to be brave. I cried in the quiet way that makes you glad your tears don't scare anyone away anymore. Savannah started showing up at the women's shelter on Wednesdays and Saturdays. I didn't know at first because I didn't ask. Then a friend told me she saw her there hauling boxes and nodding like she was being told bad news and taking it into her bones like wood takes stain. She sent checks from a job she took at a grocery store that underpays and a side shift at a breakfast place that overworks. She did not come to my porch. She did not text except to say once, 6 months clean, 6 months into community service, 6 months of sleeping like a person who knows the wolves are outside and has a door they can trust. It was poetically clumsy and therefore perfect. Winter came the way it always does here, not as a surprise, but as a fact. The inn goes quiet then, the rooms breathe. I spend a month wishing for guests and then a month grateful for the reprieve. I sanded the porch railing on days sun made the cold look friendly. Cal helped patch the part of the roof that always thinks it's too good to be attached. Garrett sent a Christmas card with a cartoon gavel hitting a pie. I put it on the mantle next to a photograph of Joe in a silly Santa hat, holding a tray of scrambled eggs like he was presenting a baby to a king.
On a clear Wednesday in February, Savannah knocked on the back door at 9 in the morning. I knew it was her by the rhythm. Two quick, one slow, like the way she tapped her pencil on her SAT practice tests long ago. I opened it because I had decided enough times that not opening it was not the right thing forever. She stood with a box in her hands and a look like she would run if I told her to. "I found these," she said. "I sold some things to pay you back, and the guy had this bin in the corner. He said someone dropped it off from an estate, then never came back. He didn't know if it was yours." I knew. She lifted the lid like a person defusing a bomb. Inside were things I had counted as gone. The guest book from our first year, the one with the kid who drew a whale and wrote, "We saw one of these," even though I'm sure he didn't. Joe's fountain pen he used to sign the mortgage. The Polaroid I'd kept in the ledger and lost in the messy weeks. A blue ribbon from the Rockland pie contest we didn't win, but which Joe insisted we display because second place is still a place. There was also something I hadn't realized I wanted to see until it was in my hands. A note Joe had written me on the back of a receipt for paint. A dumb little love note that said, "I know it's a lot. It's always a lot. But look how far we've gotten with nothing but stubbornness and a good broom. Keep me going if I go first. It is unfair to cry as hard as I cried at a man who was not in the room to hand you a rag. It is unfair, and it is also the only fair thing we get." Savannah watched my face like the weather. "I won't stay," she said. "I just wanted to give it back to the right door." She put the box on the floor. She turned to go. "Wait," I said, because my mouth worked faster than the scar tissue. She stopped. "Do you want coffee?" She stared at me like I'd offered her the inn itself. "Yes," she said. "Please."
We sat at the kitchen table that has been the place for too many pronouncements and too many pancakes. I poured and she wrapped her hands around the mug like heat could teach her something. We talked about nothing for a while. Snow tires, the best price on eggs if you go early, the old librarian who has decided to learn Instagram. When the words felt safe enough to hold, I asked about the shelter. She talked about showing up when it's dark and leaving when it's still dark, about women who need sheets and women who need someone to tell them they are not crazy, about a kid who laughs loud enough to make the walls less scary. She did not talk about herself in a way that made me want to shake her. She was learning. "I'm not asking to come back," she said. "I know that's not a thing. I know boundaries. I say that word in my head every hour like a prayer. I just wanted you to know I am doing the things I said I would do, even when no one watches." "I am watching," I said, and meant it without menace. She nodded and took it like water. When she left, I didn't hug her. She didn't ask. Sometimes the generosity is in not rushing a bridge. In April, the bay looked like a mirror someone breathes on. The inn woke up in that sleepy way places do when they are used to cycles. People booked rooms for weddings they planned last minute because time is short. Couples came back because they'd stayed here 20 years ago and wanted to remember their bravery. The bird feeder drew a goldfinch that looked like a piece of sunlight had gotten lost and decided to stay. One morning, I wrote my name into the new ledger, the one I bought in the week everything cracked, in big letters that took more space than they used to. I put the old ledger next to it, not overlapping. There is an order to things that doesn't require one to erase the other. The day we reopened for the season, I stood on the porch with a cup. I should have sat down and thought about doors. The lock on the office safe is new. The locksmith installed it with a lecture on combinations and trust that made me like him more than I expected. The front door's deadbolt is older and holds with a sound I've always loved, the soft chunk of security. I am more careful. I am not paranoid. There is a difference. I learned it. Guests checked in with smiles and questions, and I answered them like a person who had not almost had her life moved to a file folder in a man's briefcase. "You can be two things," Cal told me. I am learning what they are. I saw Savannah across the street that afternoon when she got off the bus. She didn't look over. I like that about her. She was honoring the distance we agreed to. Later, she left a brown paper bag on the back step with a note that said, "Blueberry muffins, decent. I underfolded, but I'm getting better." I laughed. In every version of this story, a person decides to get better. It's not always the one you expect. If you were to ask me now what I would tell someone like me, I would say, keep a ledger on paper and in your gut. When someone says pain is just a tax strategy, lock your door. When a girl you love does a terrible thing, remember the girl and forgive the woman only when she earns it. Change your passwords and your mind about what you owe people. Buy new locks and don't apologize. Put your name in the book of your life in letters bigger than your shame. Call the sheriff when a man like Trent thinks you are a doormat, and make sure your mat says welcome only to those you invite.
On a blue Saturday in June, a couple asked me to take their picture under the sign. I stepped off the porch and held their phone and backed up until the frame caught everything I wanted to keep. The porch, the hydrangeas, the two people who looked like they believed in all the right things. I pointed the lens at their faces and said, "Smile like you mean it." They did. The sign swung in a soft wind and the letters didn't blur. After they walked away, I stood there a moment longer, breathing. The lock on the front door was behind me, solid and quiet, like a friend who has stopped 100 storms and will stop 100 more. The other day, a woman at breakfast asked if the inn had always been mine. "Yes," I said. and then corrected myself because accuracy is a kindness too. It was mine, then ours, then almost not, and now mine again in a way that feels new. She nodded like she understood the kind of math that counts seasons and scars. It's beautiful, she said. It feels safe. Thank you, I said, and looked at the ledger on the shelf behind the desk. Its spine is the map of hands. It holds everything. It does not forgive or accuse. It records, it protects, it waits. And so do I, with a door that opens and closes because I decide, and a life that is in my name, my handwriting, my home.